you're going to fail, go big or go home. I memorized 5 pages, 12 minutes of a TED Talk, got on stage, said the first 2 words, and I don't know if it was stage fright or whatever it was, but I blinked. The entire talk, the entire 5 pages that I'd memorized just went out my head.
Hey there, I'm Sagar Soni. If you are a chronic overthinker, a wannabe productivity expert, and is having a hard time understanding how to squeeze productivity out of every waking minute, but also learn how to take a chill pill, then you are in the right place. Let's learn from successful people, YouTubers, book authors, podcasters, and every other stranger that I can get my hands on. Well, figuratively, let's learn how they balance their life. Welcome to Beyond the Speech. Hello, Ryan Brady. Thank you very much for coming on this podcast. Just a 10-second intro here. I know you are a TEDx speaker. I know you are the host of the podcast called Speaking to Expand. But I want to go much further back than that, just to understand where everything began. So for someone who is listening to you for the first time, and even for me, can you tell us how you were reborn at 17?
Yeah, sure. So August 30th, 2017, this was the 6th day of my senior year of high school. It was a normal day. Thinking about college applications, where do I want to go, all that kind of stuff. And this morning it was 7:30 a.m. and I was driving to school going a different way because my friend wanted me to pick him up, right, and give him a ride. So everything was normal. And this was my little brother's birthday, his 10th birthday. So my mom was taking him after school to a trampoline park, right? Him and all of his friends. So that day, my mom needed the SUV and she gave me her sedan to drive to school that morning, a little bit faster of a car, right? I'm driving this new route with my little brother. He's 15. He's a sophomore at the time. And it's a kind of a windy road. It's curvy. It's on a mountain, and I'm speeding. Speed limit is 25. I'm going 39. And my little brother, he looks up at me and he says, "Hey, Ryan, I think you should slow down." And I'm like, "Oh, no, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay." Big mistake. I felt like I was born and raised in a little bubble. Nothing bad could happen to me. All the bad stuff, that was just for the movies and the newspapers, but that can't happen to me. That's not possible. About 10 seconds after my brother told me that, we go around a bend and there's a truck driving in the middle of the road over that red line or the yellow line in the middle of the road. And I realized 2 things. One, I'm going too fast, and if I'd hit the brakes, slow down, wave to the guy, and keep going about my way, right? But because I was going too fast, I realized if I hit the brakes, the car is going to skid out, have a head-on collision with the driver, kill him, kill my brother, and kill me. I knew anything was better than that. And so in that moment, I decided, you know what, I'm going to turn to the right to avoid this, it just seemed like all this happened in like half a second. It was almost like an instinct in my head, this decision. So I turned to the right to avoid head-on collision from happening. But to our right, there was no road. There was an 80-foot cliff. If car flipped 6 times going down that cliff. I don't know if you have any siblings, but I was so lucky that nothing happened to my brother. Physically, he was fine. I do not know how. It definitely makes you think about the higher power and that kind of thing. But me sitting just 1 foot from him in the driver's seat, I had broke my neck, my back, my wrist, my elbow, my collarbone, and had something that doctors call a traumatic brain injury. I was in a coma for 1 week, and TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, are kind of like fingerprints. Each one is totally unique, right? Mine impacted my long-term memory. What do I mean? I woke up from the coma. I'd forgotten 2 things that we all learn as kids. What do you think those 2 things I forgot were?
Walking.
And?
Talking. That's the next one.
Yeah, bingo. Exactly. I forgot how to walk and I forgot how to speak English, which was interesting because to compensate, my brain accessed my short-term memory. And because I had spent the previous summer for about 2 months in Mexico. I woke up and I could understand English fine, but I could only produce and speak in Spanish. It was a very interesting, funny time. My having nurses walk into the room and start speaking Spanish to my parents who do not speak any Spanish. It's really funny to see that. But we're in California. There's plenty of Latina nurses in California, so it wasn't a problem. Or Spanish speaking nurses. So that was kind of the start of my departure from the rat race, the 9 to 5 path, the normal, type life that I was living before that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. So do you think that's the reason you are where you are right now, because it shaped you completely differently? And if that's the case, how does speaking come into all of this? Or was it just because you wanted to share this story with people?
There's two answers to that question, right? Number one, I think the way I interpreted this car accident from happening was, Ryan, you have so much potential in you. You're obviously very distracted in life. You're, doing a lot of stuff you shouldn't be doing. You're not motivated. You are really getting distracted from what you want to get out of life. You haven't listened to us. Imagine the universe speaking to me. We've whispered, dropped a brick on your foot. You still haven't listened. We got to shake you the F up so you actually listen to us here. And so that's kind of how I interpreted it. I definitely wasn't a speaker before. I had watched plenty of TEDx talks and TED Talks, but I was not a speaker, nor was I an entrepreneur. I was, trying to get good grades, go to good school, then get a good job that paid over $100,000. I wanted to go into engineering, that kind of thing, because I thought that was what I wanted to do at the time. And that did not end up happening, obviously.
So that brings you to that spot where you think that, okay, I need to fix my life, and I don't want to join this 9 to 5 rat race. From there, were you contacted by someone, or just because your story was so moving that just somebody reached out to you, or you reached out to someone, so that's how you ended up onto the stage? What was that process like?
I would say from the time of the car accident to leaving the 9 to 5, I was a senior in high school. It was the very beginning of my year. I definitely I didn't know there was any other option than the 9 to 5. At that time, I thought that was the only option. But that kind of pulled me out of this system and not going to school anymore. I was okay. But it took me I still graduated on time, but it took me about 2 years to really recover from the brain injury and everything kind of be where I think it should be again. Then I did not actually get approached by anybody from TED. What actually happened was I did my first year of college in Madrid, Spain, and this was 2 years later. And right at the beginning of that year, I had gotten accepted to another college for the following year. The first year was the second one. But I learned the credits from the public wouldn't transfer to the private university that I was accepted to. So I realized, okay, my parents are paying for a year of my education. The credits aren't going to transfer. In my 19-year-old brain was, then why am I even trying? I just have another type of gap year situation where I can do whatever I want. And I didn't tell my parents this. Here's what happened. I go back for Thanksgiving that year, and I'm sitting at the Thanksgiving dinner table, and my mom asks me, all smiley, "Hey Ryan, how are your grades? I'm really, really happy for you doing, university over there in Spain." And I look at her without telling her any context of the other university, not accepting credits or anything. I say, "Oh, I'm failing all my classes, Mom." And she was like, "What? What am I paying for your college education, your room, your board, all this kind of stuff? What am I paying for this for if you're not even trying? What's going on here?" And in that moment, she was angry, as I think majority of moms would be. But what it felt like for me was, she, within reason, like I understand why she felt the way she felt. For me, I felt like she lost all respect for me. And that was really tough. And so I went back to university with feeling like my mom did not love me anymore, did not respect me anymore, all of which was, the love thing was obviously BS, but at the time it didn't feel like that. Later I learned that I was making it all up in my head. But I thought, what is something I can do that's so grand that she's going to see that I really put a lot of effort into living in Spain and going to university. And my answer wasn't, oh, just get good grades, Ryan, which would have been the easy answer. It was do something so big that it will knock her socks off, that she will fall out of her chair when she learns what I did. And I knew I had a story with this car accident. I thought, I want to give a TED Talk to earn my mother's love back. That was my initial motivation to do my first TEDx talk, right? And I spent about a year and a half paying a script writer to write it with me and really working hard on it. And I finally found the email of my hometown TEDx organizer. And I sent it to him. And about a week later, I said, yes, I'm going to be a TEDx speaker. This is amazing. A week later, I get an email back. Great speech, Ryan. This is not a TED Talk. Sorry. Ouch. Okay, this sucks. My dream of doing this TED Talk, it's out the window. It's not going to happen anymore. And at this point, a lot of time had gone by. COVID had started, so I was kind of stuck in Madrid. I decided to stay in there during COVID and knew, okay, this gives me enough time to maybe give a TED Talk before I go back home and see my family again. And after being rejected, I just kind of gave up for about 6 months. And I thought, what did I do wrong? Was it the idea? Was it the speech? Was it the way I was talking to the organizer over email? What's going on with this? And I knew he wouldn't tell me because he's doing a million other things. That was the least important thing on his, kind of to-do list, so to speak, right? So I thought, who does know? And I started interviewing TEDx speakers. I spoke to one. His name was Matt Stewart. He's from Alberta, Canada. He's a 3 times TEDx speaker. He's given 3 TEDx talks. That conversation completely changed my life with TEDx. He asked me one question. He said, Ryan, how many TEDx talks do you think I applied to land these 3? And I said, well, Matt, obviously you only applied to 3. That's just how TED works. He kind of leaned back, smiled like this kid has no idea what he's talking about. He said, no, Ryan, I applied to about 300 to land these 3. I said, what? 300? Okay, so what you're telling me is this is kind of like a numbers game. He said, if you want to do it like that, yeah, you could say that. I said, okay, I can play that game. Then I applied to 15 different ones and got accepted to 2 of them, actually, over the next. So this was October. I was accepted to a TEDx talk the following October. This was the one in England that I ended up giving. Then March came, and in March, I saw an application. I actually had given my first speaking gig at a university, and it was a very interesting gig. It was virtual, right? Because COVID at the time. But what happened, and actually way I got accepted to that gig, was I told a friend of mine that I had gotten accepted to a TEDx event, and he actually had mentioned it to a professor and kind of told a little bit of my story to the professor. And the professor had a program or like a school within his university called School for Dreamers. He said, I would love to have you come speak, Ryan. So I gave that gig, and then I was on the bus home back to my apartment in Madrid from that speaking gig. It was virtual, but I went to a different place to record it. And I was on Instagram and following the TEDx account of my university. Instituto de Empresa was a business school in Madrid. And I saw they're looking for speakers for their TEDx event. Applications are open, and the theme was starting from scratch. I saw that on that bus. I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Like my story fits so perfect with this kind of theme. And I said, okay, I'm going to apply. The application was due like in 3 weeks, and I had gotten a bad habit of procrastinating a lot. So I literally waited until the very last minute before it happened. And my friend, he edited the video of the application and all that kind of stuff. I ended up getting it in, submitting it at 11:59 on the day before the due date. So the literal last minute. If the Wi-Fi had lagged, I wouldn't have got my application in. So it was a big mistake. I wouldn't recommend it. But got it in, and then 2 weeks later, a week later, I got an interview, and then they accepted me about a week after that, and it was a really cool moment. I was in a university class, and I think it was a communications class, and the professor was doing a project called like give a TED talk. And while the class was doing that project, and we were all like giving speaking gigs and like helping each other, practicing our public speaking, I looked at my email and it said, "Congratulations, you've been selected to speak at TEDx, i.e. Madrid." And I just saw that, and I looked up and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this 9 to 5 thing, this rat race, this standard path, it is perfect for some people. For me, I was like, this is not for me," and this just kind of confirmed it. And then I ended up giving that talk, and gave it in June. But remember, I said I had another one that was going to be in October, right? My friend posted a photo on his LinkedIn account of me on the TEDx stage, and the organizer of the October event saw it. I get a DM in July, like a message on WhatsApp from the organizer of the October event. He said, "Hey Ryan, congrats on giving a TEDx talk. Unfortunately, we only allow our speakers to give one TEDx talk per year, so we're going to have to resend your acceptance from our TEDx event." I was like, ouch. Okay. I've given one already. They're totally different ideas. I would still love to give a speech on his stage, but like my mission was to do a TED talk for to get my mom, love me again, right? Looking for external validation for a problem that was a total internal problem, right? Good lesson I learned. And I thought, you know what, it's okay. Like I gave a TED talk already. I don't need to worry about doing another, whatever. What did I do? I just waited a year until a year had gone by, and then I sent him a message and said, "Hey, it's been a year. It's still nobody's spoken on the idea. I'd love to come speak on your stage." And then they ended up accepting me, and I ended up flying back to England to give that TEDx talk. Long story short.
Okay, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense how the entire process was and how you ended up at the stage. So that's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. See, in my mind, I think you either have to be an expert in the field or overcome an obstacle or go through a life experience like you did. Do you agree with that, or are there other ways of getting into the speaking world?
Great question. I used to think exactly that. And in fact, when I was submitting applications and doing this kind of thing, I thought my idea might not even be good enough. Like, who the heck am I? It's big time imposter syndrome. Big time. I genuinely believe every single person has a TEDx idea we're spreading in them. You just need a little bit of help finding it. Because TEDx is very, very focused on the idea, not the person. The person is just the vessel that delivers the idea. Learned from enough TEDx organizers on Speaking to Expand podcast. So that what you just said is a limiting belief, the same one that I had when I was first getting started with the process. The life experience can help as evidence to prove the idea and validate you as the vessel for the idea. Like I know the second idea that I spoke on in England was basically about a student entrepreneur co-living incubator that I had built for about a year and was really successful. And the organizer of the event had, saw it and learned about it. Was like, "Oh my gosh, can you come speak on my stage about it? Awesome." And the evidence was just the experience. We all have experience, right? So it's just turning those into ideas that can then be given on the TEDx stage.
I see. Okay. So I would, just to summarize this, if someone is struggling with imposter syndrome, let's say I am that guy and I honestly am that right now, it's not just an example. How do you think someone can get out of that? Is it just trial and error? Keep talking about the thing that you want to focus on, if the topic that you have passion for?
I don't know what they should do. Do what I did. And maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. I had the imposter syndrome the entire time, even when I was on stage giving my first TEDx talk. I memorized 5 pages, 12 minutes of a TED talk, got on stage, said the first 2 words, And I don't know if it was stage fright or whatever it was, but I blanked. The entire talk, the entire 5 pages that I'd memorized just went out my head. I was standing there on stage like, oh no, okay. Part of me was saying, Ryan, just get off stage. Nobody will know. The video won't go up on the YouTube channel. It'll be okay. Nothing will happen. But then the other part of me was, Ryan, you worked your butt off to get on this stage. You'd be mad at yourself if you got off now. If you worked, 2 years to be standing right here on this stage. If you're going to fail, go big or go home. And I just kind of stepped into it, and I improv the entire talk. Fortunately, it was a life story, so I knew it pretty well. But when I got off stage, I felt like I just failed. It was horrible. I wrote a script, stuck to the script, and I didn't even look. About a month later, they uploaded the video on the YouTube channel. I didn't look at it for 6 months because I was so embarrassed. 6 months later, I was like, all right, enough time's gone by. I kind of forgot about the script. Let me watch it and see how it actually is. And I opened it, and then I started reading the comments. And there were so many other people that had gotten brain injuries from car accidents. That's a very crazy thing to happen that I thought, oh, nobody else has that. But there are a few. And those few that have gone through it, they know what it's like, and they've experienced that, and they were commenting on it. And it's one of the best things about being a speaker is it's so fulfilling to see your message that you deliver from stage connect with the people that it needs to connect with, and them tell you how thankful they are that you were brave enough to stay on stage and speak on that message. It wasn't until I started reading those comments 6 months after I gave my TED Talk that I got over the imposter syndrome of giving a TED Talk.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Correct me if I'm wrong there. TEDx does not pay their speakers, right?
It is correct.
Okay. So then in that case, what you are saying makes sense, that it is just a vessel for delivering your message. You get out the message out. But then if it's not a life story, let's say somebody has not gone through a life-changing experience like yourself, how can they make that TEDx platform, how can they utilize that to actually convert it into a monetizing public speaking gig as a career?
Sure, great question. So you're saying if the person doesn't have a quote unquote life-changing story?
Correct.
Yeah. So I'd say first you got to find the idea. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. I know I'll use an example. One lady I was speaking with, her idea was she thought you needed a life-changing story to be a professional public speaker. And her idea we're spreading was the kind of opposite of that. Her idea was why do you feel like you need a life-changing story to be a public speaker? Why can't I just be, someone that hasn't gone through that kind of experience and speak on that? Still needs some work to kind of massage it out, but she understands the concept. The concept is picking a narrative or kind of a set of beliefs that 80 to 90% of people would assume. And then what's wrong with that set of beliefs, or how could it be done better? Like my first idea was how traumatic brain injuries could reveal more than they remove. The narrative, I'm going to take a guess that you probably, if I ask you, hey, Sagar, do you want I'll give you a free brain injury tomorrow. You'd say, no, I'm okay. I don't want that, right? 99% of people would probably answer that way. My idea was, you might not want one, but here's how if you do end up with one, you can make it one of the best things that ever happened to you in your entire life. So what's wrong with that narrative, or how it can be done better? That's kind of the framework that I use with, that I've kind of identified and seen with enough people at this point. That was the first end of your question. What was the other half?
No, just that if somebody has not gone through it, how do you monetize that so you can continue speaking in that world and find different platforms and continue speaking that? Or I'll go on to the next part of that question that I wanted to ask you. So, for example, is it just public speaking that would be able to create a full-time career, or do people or public speakers start having they start becoming authors? They write books, so they promote the idea that's in the book, so now they are an author and they go on stages to talk about their books. Or if you have read the book The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, they have a workshop now that they do multiple times a year. They go to different corporate events and it's called The One Thing. So it's either you do something, write a book or a workshop or such, or any corporate events, go to it and use those events and public speaking platforms to promote the main product that they have. Is that how they monetize it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I did first, and then what I kind of realized could be a possibility. So for me, after I gave my first one, I started working as a salesperson for a mobile application development company, and we did 7 figures in business in our first 7 months. The sales funnel was LinkedIn outbound from me and the 2 other salespeople's LinkedIn accounts. 90% of the sales came from my LinkedIn account. Why was that? Simply because I had the photo of me on the TEDx stage with the letters in the background, and then the featured section, the actual TED Talk. So if they wanted to watch it, they could. It's not a normal kind of SDR message. Someone's given a TED Talk, so they would see the photo, say, oh, kind of interesting. Let me open his message. Do I want to respond to his message? I'm not sure. Let me watch his TED Talk, then I'll decide if I want to respond. And I would get messages saying, hey, I don't normally respond to these messages, but you earned my ear for a chat. That kind of message was a very standard response. And then that became a sales call, and then that became business, right? So that was how we kind of, I don't want to say monetize the TED Talk, but monetize the credibility awarded to you as a TEDx speaker is more how I actually monetized it at that time. What I've learned from interviewing enough TEDx speakers and professional speakers, for every TEDx talk you give, you can expect a $2,500 to $5,000 increase in your speaking fee based on the perceived value of the TEDx badge that you have as a speaker, right? That's just how the market works, and that's what I'm seeing so far. That is a really common way that you said with The One Thing. A lot of speakers do write books. I was speaking to one named, his name was John Coyle, and he's a really top level speaker. And what he told me was, write the memoir, like write the first book just to get you on more stages. That's kind of your business card, your story. After your first book, that's, kind of a standard story book about you, maybe something, whatever it is, that can get you a lot of speaking gigs. But there's kind of a ceiling for that. With that first book and all the gigs you're doing and the referral gigs, and maybe you have a LinkedIn outbound messaging sequence going to event planners and event organizers, that can get you to having gigs to about $25,000 as your speaking fee. But to pass that, you need what he called celebrity status. That might be because you're a celebrity, or it could be from a book. Like he was talking about other authors that, like you said, Gary Keller, people that have a book that it's such a well-known book, like Tim Ferriss, for example, that they get that celebrity status because of their book. When you have that, that's how you break past the $25K fee to around 30 to 50,000 to, and then at that point you're kind of charging whatever you want. But like old presidents that have been, presidents before, like that level of people, their fees are anywhere from 150 to sometimes even $200,000 for a speaking gig, right? So that's what you have to do to kind of pull those numbers. But to break into the 30 to 50,000, that's the kind of celebrity status by having a book that is like a 4-hour work week. The One Thing, one of those kinds of books is what you would need to break into those numbers. And that's why he's writing one right now, to break into those numbers. Hopefully that kind of answers your question there.
That exactly answers my question. So I feel like if you want to be just a public speaker, then there is only so much you can grow. But if you really want to get into that, you need something on the side, and that allows you to gain that celebrity status. And yes, I think I agree with you, because when I heard that TEDx does not pay for it, so my question was, okay, why would someone go there? But then it gives you the credibility. Let's keep aside the fact that you get experience, you get exposure and all that, but that would be the very first step of building your personal brand. and the credibility goes along with it because TEDx is crazy huge, right? So yes, that answers my question. Have you worked with other organizations, and how does it differ with TED or TEDx?
You mean other organizations for booking speakers?
Yes.
So what I can tell you from what I've learned by interviewing people that work in this industry and professional speakers and event planners and speakers bureau decision makers, TEDx focuses on the idea. The idea is the number one priority. They're accepting the idea and not you. You're just kind of the icing on the cake to validate the idea and say, okay, this person, they're the best person to deliver this idea, and here's why. That's as simple as it is with TEDx. You don't need a huge, amazing personal story to land a TED Talk. You just need an idea worth spreading and why you. With event organizations, what I've learned, I spoke to a lady that had worked for Washington Speakers Bureau for about 35 years, that had interviewed thousands of speakers over 35 years, that knew what they were looking for. And I asked her, I said, hey, what's going on here? I have at the time I had a LinkedIn top voice badge or whatever. I had the TED Talks. I had the social media content going out. I had the podcast. I said, what's going on? Why am I not, getting the amount of gigs I want? Why can I not charge the fee I want? What's going on here? She said, you're making it all about you. That's what you're doing wrong. I said, okay, interesting. Tell me more. What do you mean? She said, for events that are looking for speakers, the way they look at it, the number one priority is the event host, the promoter, right? Number two is the audience. You as a speaker, you're the last person of importance for them, right? You need to make the event, bring value to the event host and the audience. A lot of times the value to the event host is through the value you give to the audience. So just as an example, like I said, TED, say, hey, here's my idea, here's why me. The events and organizations, the way she explained it, the example she gave. So let's say you're going to an event and they have 100 people in the audience, and you're teaching them a way to, let's say, be more efficient with their time and think faster and kind of make decisions faster. So imagine you have this event, there's 100 people, and you're talking to the event planner. They say, hey, well, why should you talk here, right? And let's say, I was speaking to a speaker last night, and he was saying he's using martial arts to access flow state, which saves people time and decision making. How many decisions do they have to make per day? Okay, cool. How long does the average decision make that they have? Let's say it takes, an hour, whatever it is, right? Let's say if you can cut back in the amount of time it takes for the employees, the 100 people at the audience, to make a decision by 50%, and they're making one important decision a day. That's 30 minutes that he's giving back to the employer of his employees' time per day. There's 100 employees in the audience. How much do they pay them per hour? Okay, it's 30 minutes per employee, 5 days a week, 30 times 5. You're looking at that amount of time, times that by 4. That's how much money you're saving per month based on the amount of time that they pay the employee. It ends up coming out to, for easy example, $100,000 a month is what the employee, the event host, is saving through what the speaker is teaching them. So that's why charging $10,000 seems like nothing if the employer is getting $100,000 back from it, right? And when this woman explained this to me, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I was focused on me, not the value to the audience and the event host. That's how I'd say they're different.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. That is the reality if you want to become a public speaker, or professional speaker. Can you share from your experiences and speaking to other speakers the harsh realities of becoming a professional speaker? What do rejections feel like? What does the behind the scenes look like? The preparation phase, rejection phase. It gets you into a stage that, do I even matter? Is my idea even worth it? What does that picture look like?
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot of personal development with it that comes with it. And I think hosting your own podcast is a great way to kind of start with it and find your voice and that kind of thing, and see yourself as worth going on stages. like the same way when I get on a stage, it's the same voice that you hear speaking to you now, right? And that's how I kind of see it. Is I just view a podcast as a stage, and an actual stage is an actual stage, but it's all the same voice, and that's why podcasting has actually made it way easier to give a speaking gig, because I can go on and I know my voice. I know who I'm talking to. I know how I talk. I know how I kind of position myself, all that kind of stuff, right? I would say the rejection for me, it was not a problem because I worked in sales for 2 years. It's kind of part of the game. It's like every rejection you get is closer to a yes. So it's, stack up the rejections so you can finally get the yes. But it is kind of a numbers game. I think I asked one speaker who I had on the podcast. His name is Frankie Russo, awesome guy. He had brought his business. It was a very successful business. It was Inc. 500 based in Louisiana, and he basically built AI agents for companies. And I asked him, "What's the trick?" Kind of a similar question to what you said. He said, "Ryan, at the end of the day, the best thing you can do as a speaker is just have a good speech." I thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I think at the end of the day, that's really what it is. Of course, there's when you network with event planners and event organizers and people you meet at the events, that can help because they know people who know people. NSA, National Speakers Association, is a great one. I would say that's a fantastic first step you can take, is joining that, because they're all speakers. They all have done plenty of gigs. They all have the connections with event planners and decision makers at events that maybe they've spoken there twice already, and the organizer is looking for someone different. And they say, "Oh, I know all these other speakers at NSA. I can give you this person, this person, this person." That tends to be what I'm seeing is different about it. Another thing I learned from a really awesome speaker, his name's Greg Williams. He teaches negotiation. So he kind of like Chris Voss. He's actually knows Chris Voss, and they know each other. And I asked him, what do a lot of speakers kind of get wrong? And he said, that's the one thing that they're missing. When you're at the finish line, the reason that they're not closing the deals and getting the gigs is because the person asks, "Well, what's your fee?" And you say, let's say it's $10,000. "Oh, my fee is $10,000. They say, "Oh, okay, look, we're going to go look around and see who else we can find, but it's not really in our budget right now." That's totally wrong. The way he explained it was, they ask, "What's your fee?" You say, "Well, depends. How many audience members are we having there? What's the goal of the event? Are you looking to include purchases and copies of my book you want to sell at the event?" That kind of thing, because all of those, and then at the end of the day, how long do you want me on stage? And then do you cover travel? All those things, and asking those questions to then determine what your fee is for that event, and then negotiating it, right? That was what I really learned from Greg, was he was saying how important negotiation is when you're at the finish line of actually closing the gig, because it's just sales at the end of the day. It is a little bit different because you are the product. But that's what Greg said. There's one other speaker I met. I think I mentioned him earlier, and he was saying he never talks about price. When the person gets on the call to close the deal, to book him, they say, "Okay, how much do you cost?" He says, "Oh, I have to refer this to my manager," and then they call it. They say, "I can give you your number, and she can kind of work out the details with you if this is something you want and you're serious about." Then she does the close. So there's a few different ways to do it. I don't know if there's an official right way. I think there is for everyone, I think there's a right way that works for every person, because everybody has different skill sets. I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it definitely does. I'm just trying to recap of every single thing that makes sense to become a professional speaker. I'm just thinking, okay, have a good idea, have a good niche if you are trying to monetize it, and if you, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the speech. So have that really tailored down. And in terms of actually presenting it out there, have different associations. So TEDx is one. Maybe join NSA so that you can find other speakers out there. Maybe find nearby schools or colleges with a classroom of 20, 30, 50, 100 people. So you can start your speaking career that way. I agree with the idea of attending other events because that's how you and I met. We met at Growth with Video Live in Vegas. So honestly, that event, though, that 3-day event is the reason I started this. Speaking to Pat Flynn. So after he finished his event, his gig, he was just heading back to his room, and I shared the elevator with him. And that's when he said, "Why don't you just start a podcast if this is what you care about?" That was a 30-second conversation that led to this right now.
The power of events, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. So, okay. Now, in terms of products or maybe writing a book or having some sort of a product that you can sell to corporates, do you think podcasting is a good enough product or is that the same thing as speaking?
Would you're saying sell a podcast appearance, or you're saying sell? What are you saying sell?
No, instead of writing a book or instead of creating workshops, my way of getting my image and my brand out, that's my reason of starting this podcast, that I want to be a speaker, but for the next 100, 200, 300 episode, all I want to do is this, and I'll connect with TEDx, I'll connect with NSA, I'll see if I can attend local events here. So I will do that on the side. But if I want to just do this, is that a reasonable way to make this an actual career?
What I would say is, if you have the asset, it's kind of like a TED Talk, right? You can't do a TED Talk and then just put it out there and say, "Oh, okay, now give me all the speaking business. Come here," and just kind of expect it to happen. But if you have the podcast and you say, then you start doing the outreach to kind of events and those kinds of things, and say, "Hey, this is what my podcast does." Like, let's just do a little audit with you. Who do you serve on your podcast? Like, not the guests, but the listeners. What is the value the listeners get from listening here?
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to break apart the idea of that productivity just means outworking and just constantly working. But we have focused on it for so much in the last decade that in my mind, we have crossed that barrier of productivity and toxic productivity. So it's time to relax because that is affecting your mental health and people are going the wrong way about productivity. So that's the aim that's the focus that I'm going with.
And what is the right way?
Slowing down, having awareness that there is a better way of doing the same work without getting exhausted before the end of the day.
Okay, perfect. So here's what I would do if I was in your position looking to get booked and paid to speak, not for TEDx, but booked and paid at speaking events. I would look at time management conferences or events that focus on teaching people time management. And I would leverage your podcast to kind of be the in. I would message the event planner and say, "Hey, I saw your recent event. I saw this, and this speaker at your event. I think they'd be fantastic guests to have on my podcast. I interview X people about Y to provide Z kind of value to the audience. Of these speakers you've had on your stage, which do you think would make sense for me to reach out to?" That'd be an easy way that you can start the conversation with them. Then maybe through the conversation, they say, "Oh, we were actually looking for a speaker coming to our upcoming event. Have you ever considered speaking?" And then you kind of tell me about your audience. Okay, gotcha. I learned this really interesting thing on this one episode I recorded with this person, and it was similar to what this person said. And then I kind of realized this, and this is what I, now love speaking about to people that I meet. And they say, "Oh, that's awesome, Sagar. I would love to have you kind of speak at our event like that." That's, if I was in your case, what I would do, how to leverage the podcast. It just kind of being kind of like a TEDx where it's like key to open the door. In your case, that would be how you use the podcast as the key to open the door to a meeting with an event planner and actually building a relationship with one of them.
Understood. That would be a great way to get my foot in the door. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you very much for this. I have one last question for you. What's next for you?
Yeah, so I would say this next year, I am doubling down on the business. I'm taking a softer approach to podcast recording. We have 35 episodes released now as of when we're recording this episode here for the Speaking to Expand podcast, but we have 111 episodes recorded. We were doing one episode released per week, but that would take us out into mid-2026 if we were to continue doing that. So we're going to be switching it up in January or February to do 2 episodes released per week, once Monday, once Thursday. And then I can focus on the business instead of recording, because recording a podcast is great, but there's not a direct ROI on the time instantly as much as there is on sales and marketing. Right now I'm building out the team. I'm focused on doubling down on the business. The goal is to bring it to a lot more revenue in 2020 by the end of 2025. So building up the business, the podcast kind of taking a back burner for the year and focused on just fulfilling for the clients that we have, helping them get booked on the TEDx stage and any other stages that we're doing. We are putting together some really cool relationships with other business owners and putting together awesome deals of, oh, you want to do this in the future, you want to have, say, 5 gigs a year or 5 gigs every quarter. Okay, so we can, get you podcasts, get you gigs, and then Rotary gigs, and then TEDx, and then all this kind of stuff, and helping with all of that. So that's the focus for this next year. 2026 is going to be a whole different ballgame. But yeah, I got my 2025 planned out the year right here, and I got it right in front of me. So I like where your head's at. Yeah.
That's exciting. Yeah. Thank you very much for taking the time out of this, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to see your work. I follow your Instagram. I see the different events you are attending to. So I'll leave that in the show notes here as well, along with your podcast. Thank you very much for this.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks.